Disgruntled students across the country's universities are up in arms over what they've described as a crisis at the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Yesterday, a number of students were protesting and took their pleas to the union buildings, and the march then turned violent. We now speak to some of the student representatives to give us a better sense of what the march was about and why it turned violent. University of Pretoria student leader Angela Monaheng and William Sezoe, SRC Vice President at the Stellenbosch University. Thank you very much to both our guests. Angela, let's start with you perhaps. What was the idea or at the core of the students' march?
Good afternoon. So basically what the march was about was to initially submit a memorandum to the Department of Education and for the Minister of Education as well to receive these demands, because a lot of students have been facing grievances regarding NSFAS throughout the year, and students have been introduced to this new system called Tenet that has also been causing a lot of inconveniences. And a lot has just been happening. A lot of students haven't been able to get consistent funding from NSFAS, and unfortunately that led to a whole lot of events that eventually led to from a peaceful protest to a violent protest because students were just not heard.
A lot has been happening, William, according to Angela. What's happening where you are?
Well, I'm at Stellenbosch University, and one of the companies allocated to Stellenbosch is called Coinvest. And actually, only this month, Coinvest has started rolling out paying students at Stellenbosch University. But some of the concerns that we've started picking up is that initially the agreement between the companies and NSFAS is that the monthly in-bundle fee is 12 Rand. However, at Stellenbosch University, students are paying at 13 Rand. That's one of the things that we've picked up. Then another thing that we've picked up at Stellenbosch is that students who are living in private accommodation or students that are or residences that do not cater, they ought to receive 1,650. That's before the exorbitant charges obviously gets deducted. However, these students have received 305 Rand, and that's the amount of money that students actually in residences that are being catered for ought to receive. So there has been some misinterpretation of data and registration data by NSFAS itself and the company, and currently both of these two institutions, Coinvest and NSFAS, is throwing a blind eye to the concerns of these students who have received the wrong amount of money.
You accuse NSFAS of turning a blind eye, William. We had the spokesperson of NSFAS on the program last month, and he mentioned a meeting that he had with student leaders, or that the organization had with student leaders, where some of these issues were apparently ironed out. Were you part of that meeting?
So the meeting was particularly with the student or the South African Union of Students, who ought to represent
Okay, we're losing you there intermittently, William. So let's go to Angela. Angela, were you part of that meeting?
I was not.
I think William just got there just now.
Are you back, William?
Am I back?
Okay, there you are. Please finish your thought.
Apologies.
No worries. Actually, let's take it from the top.
So I was not part of that meeting. It was actually the South African Union of Students that ought to be there and ought to represent the views of SRCs and students. However, we are very disappointed in that body. Hence, you would see that SRCs actually in themselves organized the protest yesterday at the union buildings and also at DHET. SAWS is actually quite missing in the picture because they have somewhere failed to represent our views. So I was not part of that meeting. However, we are still very much concerned with the costs, although organizations such as SASCO and SAWS has agreed that 12 Rand is not too much. However, we feel that 12 Rand could have gone for a bread for students. So we are still rejecting the sort of payments in its entirety, and not only certain aspects that are being rejected by SAWS, for example.
Sure. Angela, what then does that mean, especially for the movement, for lack of a better expression, in terms of what you're calling for as students, if there's disagreements among various bodies?
I think where we start losing it is the point where it starts becoming a political agenda. Like William mentioned, it's these unions, SASCO, etc. We're not saying that, people who are fighting for what's necessary in terms of, advocating for the student body. But what we need to realize that this is a national crisis. And this is where it is necessary for the student representatives and every other student leader engaged within the matter to take hands together and actually come to the realization that this is the crisis and this is what we need to do as young people and come together. I mean, if you look at from our history, if you look at the 1976 Soweto uprising, young people came together because they were fighting for the quality of education, and that's exactly what we were trying to do. We were trying to appeal to NSFAS, appeal to the Department of Education, appeal to the minister that, look, this is how things are, and at this point, things are not working the way they should. And this is where the demands of the students are, and all we need is for them to listen and appeal with us and come to us with constructive feedback so that we can have and know a way forward. Because like William said, we do not have clear information. We do not have a clear consensus between the students or between the representatives and the Department of Education and the minister that this is what is happening with NSFAS and this is the way forward. Because now students are defunded from the whim. We do not know why. We do not know how. A student could wake up tomorrow morning and they're no longer funded by NSFAS. They eventually kicked out of their residences, as William mentioned. They sleep on streets, at garages, in libraries, and it becomes a whole thing. And that is why, unfortunately, it had come to the point where it was emotionally, how do I say it? It became an emotional thing for students, and that's why it turned violent. And unfortunately, that was what happened.
Angela, as we wrap up the conversation, we understand that the protest to the union buildings turned violent. It is alleged that some students were also burning tires. One student has been arrested. What is the latest with the student that has been arrested, and why did it turn violent?
So, as I mentioned before, it had become a political agenda because the initial mandate was to go to the union building so that we can submit the relevant memorandum to the relevant person so that the information and the demands of the students are transferred. So now what happened in between that is that some of the students who were part of the student command and other respective parties, they were not satisfied and they started, initiating a sense of violence towards the police, and that's where things started turning violent. I was part of the people who were there. We were running away from rubber bullets and, there was tear gas everywhere and things just became chaotic. But unfortunately, there were people who just, kept engaging in the matter. And actually, it's not just one. I believe it was about 21 students who were actually arrested. Perhaps maybe the correct information was not given in that aspect. But there was just a lot of chaos going on, and it was just all over the place. So I think what needs to be taken into consideration that yes, as students, as much as we have the right to education, we also have the responsibility to step up in the right way and appeal to the minister, appeal to the Department of Education in a way that is also respectful to the resources that we have in our country. But at the same time, we need to take into consideration that students have been coming forward for more than half a year now. And it was just unfortunate that it had come to this case. But I believe that, two wrongs don't make a right. And it's about time that a clear mandate is given so that there is a solution to the problem at hand.
Thank you very much to both our guests. Angela Monaheng is a student leader at the University of Pretoria. William Sezoe, SRC Vice Chair at Stellenbosch University. Thank you.